What kind of a policy shift does Sri Lanka need going forward? And what strategic planning and shift is needed as Sri Lanka looks at becoming a game changer in the region, and also in terms of nation building, how far have we come? To talk about all this and much more, I've invited to our studios a gentleman who has shifted policy and who has shifted strategy in the UAE to build brands and the country's brand there in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. May I warmly welcome to our studios Dr. Udaya Indrarathna.
Thank you, Indeewari. Thank you so much for inviting me to your studio, and I thank Derana also for giving me this opportunity and for the invitation. Thank you, Indeewari.
Thank you very much. Let me just give a brief introduction to you. You have been, you're renowned for strategic management and of course building platforms for both corporates and governments. I've been just looking at your profile. In 2012, you joined the government of Dubai, worked for 10 years for the Dubai government as Executive Director, Policy and Strategy attached to Department of Tourism and Commerce and Marketing, and you've been making strategy in terms of how the country's outlook should be, and also as Executive Director you made specific strategy platforms. I'd like to talk about all that, while you also lecture as in terms of strategic management for the Paris Sorbonne Abu Dhabi in strategic management. I look forward to a wonderful discussion for the next 45 minutes. But let me first ask you, you have returned to Sri Lanka. It seems like you want to give something back to your mother country.
Indeewari, thank you. Indeed, Indeewari. I was away from Sri Lanka for 37 years. And I strongly feel there's something I can give back to Sri Lanka. I'm very pragmatic, and I really think there's a time for me to give something back. So I'm very much here. Although I do some executive coaching abroad, now I'm based in Sri Lanka.
You work very closely with the government leaders of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and in terms of shifting policy and strategy there, I'd like to talk about that too.
Yeah, from 2001 to 2012, I was attached to Dubai government, Department of Tourism and Commerce Marketing. When I left, I was the Executive Director, Policy and Strategy.
Right.
Then in year 2012, I joined Abu Dhabi government as a senior advisor on a 5-year contract. Let me tell you, UAE is the most vibrant country in the world, and they are a far-thinking nation, and I was so fortunate to work in that kind of environment that led by, in my opinion, the world's #1 visionaries, one namely His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum of Dubai, and in Abu Dhabi, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. They are both my heroes. They are unbelievably knowledge-based leaders that have changed desert nation to world beaters. So I must say that I'm privileged to work with such an environment at that level.
You have seen the emphasis that these countries give to policy making, policy and strategic direction of the country, and let's look at Sri Lanka. What can we do here?
Indeewari, is a very good question. In my opinion, we need to shift away from ad hoc management. Strategic planning, a cohesive, coherent strategic plannings are the way forward for Sri Lanka. Now, what is the meaning of strategic planning? Strategic planning is a well thought out plan which give direction for its people and give you an inspirational picture, and that's combine all the resources available. That's in simple term what strategic plan is all about. So without developing strategic plan culture in Sri Lanka, whether it's government or corporate, that's the game changer for me in Sri Lanka, I believe. So for us to go and change the game, I personally believe we have to, in academic terms, we have to build or formulate a country-specific strategic plan first. Usually, a country-specific strategic plan has at least 5 major pillars. The first one, of course, economy development pillar. Second will be the social development pillar. Third will be the legal and security pillar.
Right.
Fourth, infrastructure and development pillar. Fifth, in Sri Lanka, will be agriculture pillar. So imagine we have developed a country strategic plan based on this 5 pillars. It could be more though. Then if I had to elaborate this process, my area is economy development, so let me take economy development strategy as a plan. So out of this 5 country plan, we picked the economy pillar, and we need to formulate an economic blueprint. Economic blueprint in Indeewari usually has key drivers and supporting enablers. The key drivers in Sri Lanka, it could be 8 key drivers, which are the most important engines of taking Sri Lanka to the next level.
What could these 8 key drivers be?
In Sri Lanka, we report GDP on 3 sectors, which are agriculture, industry, manufacture, which means and service. Now, within that 3 sectors, I would say tourism will be one key engine. Second will be agriculture and fisheries. Third will be globally employable workforce, because we are very dependent on our foreign employment. Fourth will be a service hub, which include financial service, shipping and banking and IT, of course. Then SME and small medium enterprises and startup engine, which is a very important for a country, and so on. Then what happened in the is that once you develop the engines, that won't work very well unless you develop horizontal enablers that hold those economic key drivers. If I may explain to you, the very first one is productivity and innovation of our people. The second will be science, technology and innovation as well. And if I explain to you this 2 pillars first as horizontal pillars, years ago, maybe 25 years ago, Singapore and Thailand, they developed Singapore Productivity Institute. And then science technology were developed parallel, targeting each industry. And then the standard councils were developed also to support. So the retail, construction, electronics, all were targeted as future industries, and they developed productivity, science, technology and standard council to make sure that happened. So if you look at today Singapore, that strategy was built 25 years ago. Similarly, Thailand. So we need to think this way, not generic productivity institute, targeted productivity per segment, per enterprise. Then similarly, we need to build a nation brand platform, because without building a nation brand, our economic engine cannot be driven. The economic vitality of a country is very dependent on nation's brand strategy. So yes, the 8 engines I was talking about, it could be 10 engines as key drivers, need to be working and supported by productivity, science, technology and beyond. And also what will happen is the education and skill are also very important here. In Sri Lanka, only 8% of 370,000 childbirth goes to universities. 92% of children do not have that opportunity to go to universities. And that is a very low percentage of university graduate output. At that level of education level, we cannot be a global competitor.
You talk about Sri Lanka being a global a game changer in the region and in the rest of the world. But you say before, forget about being a player, we have to be a game changer. But Sri Lanka, in fact, has to play this game in order to be a game changer.
Right.
How do we play the game? Where do we go from here? You talk about strategy, you talk about these key drivers, the verticals and horizontals. But in your view, you're somebody who has been, who has driven through the practical aspect of implementing strategy and policy.
Yep.
But where do you see Sri Lanka? And I'd also like an answer for the game changer matter.
Yeah. First let me answer the game changer. Now, we are very skillful, very talented nation, Sri Lankans are. And I travel around the world and I see Sri Lankans, they're top. And there's no shortage of talent in my country. What we need to do is develop right environment to bring about this challenge. So therefore, we need to think beyond norm as game changers. One is the nation brand strategy I was talking about. Now, the second I was talking about the strategic planning power as a cohesive strategic planning. So if I explain to you what we need to do, is those each key drivers. What we need to do in academic sense is do a cluster competitiveness study for each cluster. What that means? We look at, let's say, agriculture, or let's say SME development. What will be the best of class in the world running such a cluster? Then, once we study that, then we do a cluster strategy matching the best class thinking, and that's a game changer. Not just enhancement of what we do to 5-10% enhancement, totally reaching out and match that world class cluster in that particular cluster we selected. Therefore, the 8 engines we selected as economy will have 8 world class engines to run. How would you do this? Normally the proposed mechanism is that we need to develop a working group mechanism which consists of 3 types of players. The first player is the experts of that. Let's say agriculture, for example. Agriculture, within agriculture, there's a T component. So let's say now T is $1 billion. We want to take to $5 billion. The working group will consist of people from tea industry, from the factory, and also the consultant, and also the global expert who can add value added supply chain. So in this way, we can do a game changer, and then every industry, every cluster will have a strategic plan. Then what we do is we do something called strategic staircase, like a staircase. It's a 10-year horizon. So we are here today, let's say 1 billion tea industry, we want to go to 10 billion. Each year, where are we taking our industry is the strategic staircase. Then we need to assess and review using KPIs. We should use balanced scorecard concept to make sure that the capacity building, the processes and customers and the financial are properly evaluated. Right. So these are the game changers I'm talking about.
I think I'd like to talk about all that and the 10-year plan for Sri Lanka after this short break at Hyde Park. To stay with us. Welcome back. You're joining us at Hyde Park. We're talking with Dr. Udaya Indrarathna, expert in policy and strategy making. Dr. Udaya, now you were talking about cluster components and how we move on from sector oversight, whether we plan there or whether we move forward. But my question here to you is, with all this strategy, where do you see Sri Lanka? Where do we go from here? You talk about nation building. I'd like to know about that. But before that, I really want to know, with the idea, with the strategy and policy that you have in mind for my country, your country, our country, Where do we go from here?
Well, I think let's start with the nation branding strategy. I think by developing a nation branding strategy to be a world-class player, that may be the starting point. If I elaborate what is nation branding is all about, it is actually a 7-pillar model which academics used. Center for nation branding Indeewari is the leader of the country. The leadership brand that takes country's competitive advantage and increase its competitiveness. Now, leadership has at least 5 maturity levels we are talking about. The very first level we call agrarian leadership maturity, which means the agriculture hub. The second we call natural resource hub position for a country, which means a focus on oil, gas and gems for that matter. Third we call manufacturing leadership maturity, which is manufacturing hub stage. The fourth level we call service economy maturity, which is developing service economy hub. Fifth is we call knowledgeable leadership maturity, which is global knowledgeable leadership maturity. So when you brand as a leader, as a knowledgeable leader, that leader obviously will understand the agriculture hub. He'll also understand the manufacture. Yes, indeed.
Are you trying to say that our future leader, or whoever the leader be in this country, has to be mature, has to definitely and most importantly have maturity in all those areas?
Well, the ideal situation is that a knowledgeable leadership only can do the game changer for Sri Lanka. That's why I thought of talking about the nation brand first, because then only the right decision can be made. So I said we call also this unitive leadership. Unitive leadership is all about being that knowledgeable leader who understands service economy, who understand the manufacture economy, who understand and agri economy and so on. So then only the right decisions can be made and right strategy can be made and country can come up. Then the center of the nation brand, since is the leader, let's look at the 6 pillars. The very first pillar is the way the country perceived by outside world on the governance. How the country is governed, whether it's a fair system or not. Second is the export. What level, what kind of export that country produced and used around the world. Third element, which is a very, very important element, is about its people, the competence level of its people and the tolerance level of these people. How important this pillar, as an example, Dubai is championing in nation branding, and Abu Dhabi, UAE for that matter. They recently set up a Ministry of Tolerance in UAE.
Something that Sri Lanka definitely needs.
Right. And then what happened? Year 2009, UAE is called Year of Tolerance. So the lot of countries who are knowledgeable in nation branding are focusing on enhancing their rating to make sure the economic vitality is and potential reach as a result of nation brand focus.
What is the potential GDP for Sri Lanka when we talk about nation branding and all the strategic shift that you're proposing we make?
Yeah. In the very good question. Today, Sri Lanka GDP around 4,000 per capita. Now, very first thing we need to do is to take us to 12,000 GDP per capita scenario as a direction.
Possible?
Well, Sri Lankans are very aggressive people, and we have proven that we can do. And I'm very positive that economy war can be win. So long a right approach are used, and also the Singapore theory, the MPH secret formula is applied, which I'll explain to you what is MPH is about. So I think it's really possible. But I think the very first thing we need to do is look at 4,000 GDP. The potential GDP of a country in Indeewari is that at 100% employment, how much at the current inflation level, at current skill level, how much that increased GDP from 4,000. So we need to first do that calculation. Once that determined, then let's say if it becomes 5 or 6,000, I'm not so sure, then there are 6,000 more to go. Then we need to find strategies, how can we fill that gap very quickly. And I have put some thoughts. I've started developing a economic blueprint for Sri Lanka.
So is it at draft stage now, or?
Well, I would say 95% completion level. I took the liberty to develop and formulate a blueprint for Sri Lanka.
Do you think we can present it to a new president once the election is over?
Well, I think that by that time it will be ready, for sure. It's almost done. So the point is, Indeewari, so that I talked to you about 3 pillars. The fourth pillar is the tourism of a country, the tourism potential of a country. Fifth pillar is about the investment and living conditions of that country. So what happened is, a nation brand, we need to enhance these pillars for us to be accepted around the world as a nation that is very competitive.
On the ground, at the lowest level, what changes do we make here? Because we're talking about the international accepting Sri Lanka, looking at Sri Lanka, the brand of the nation, how do we uplift it? But at the same time, in order to uplift the brand from within Sri Lanka, there are so much changes we need to make for the people, for them to feel that Sri Lanka has to be a game changer. People have to believe in the nation.
Right. So I think this is a really good point. Indeewari, see, what happened is, we said one pillar of the nation brand is people's competence and people tolerance. So competence of the people are the most important thing. That goes hand in hand with our education and skill development. Now, I said before, 8% of our children only has the university access. So if we can bring that to 40–45%, like every developed countries are, and that is a game changer. And the rest of them, we need to bring a high-tech and skillful institutes to support the rest of the other children.
But we also need a lot of investments coming into the country. So how do we make this investor attractive, investor friendly, a place that investors want to come when our doing business index is not doing good, and when all the other indexes are not doing so well?
In East to Do Business Index in Indeewari, we are at 100th place. And on Global Competitiveness, we are the 84th place. There's a huge challenge for Sri Lanka, and that means there are more than 100 countries above us. When an investor wish to come to Sri Lanka,
Sri Lanka will be the 100th option.
Right? So now that's very damaging. So that's where we need to understand. In the competitive index, there are about 9 pillars to look into. And similarly, East to Business Index has about 12 components to look into. For example, how you register a company, how long it takes, and taxation and all that. That's why I told you a strategic plan will take care of most of these issues. When you develop a strategic plan, you deep dive on the current situation and every angle. And then you take corrective actions and you take forward instead of doing ad hoc thinking. So what will happen is, if you do a strategic plan, and let's say we target to make East to Do Business from 100 to, let's say, 40 or 30, all these issues will be handled, and that's the way forward for Sri Lanka. And then only the investors could come like the way you wish to do.
Your proposed, your draft proposal for nation building in terms of a strategy and policy shift, what is it looking at? right now in order for Sri Lanka to attract investors?
Well, if I may say that Sri Lanka need to develop an export-driven economy. I had looked at our diagnostic. Sri Lanka's export GDP per capita is only $500, compared to $50,000 for Singapore, only for export, and Malaysia at $9,500. So the reports very clearly indicates that our $500 GDP per capita from export come from certain industries are low producing GDP, where the high GDP export oriented countries have focused on other industries like machinery, like electrical, like extracts and all that. So we need to first, after taking care of ease to do business and global competitor index, getting that clear, we need to then identify what are the best possible industries that suit for Sri Lanka. Now, as a strategy, Vietnam has a great model. What Vietnam has done in Indeewari is that they have signed government-to-government MOUs with certain countries, and they develop their skill levels and technology and develop an export-based business. Very good example is that they signed a MOU with Italy, about €4 million MOU invested by Italy, and they identify certain clusters in Vietnam that has certain capabilities, like for example Moratuer, or people are good at carpentry, and Vevaldini, they are very famous at cane. In Vietnam, every country there you have some generic ability. So they select 4 areas. One is shoe manufacturing, leather, furniture, etc. And they went and they did a joint working group between Italy and Vietnam. And what they did is that the group were given a task to set up a base in Vietnam and to train the Vietnamese shoemakers or leather product skill.
Are you saying that there is possibility and a facilitation for exchange in know-how, technical know-how, as well as people-to-people cultural exchange?
Exactly. Not only that, they also Vietnamese then went to Italy. They look at how they work in Italy, and finally what happened, that became an industry. That's only in 2010 they started. Now these 4 Italian companies have transferred their technical know-how, their knowledge, and also their equipment and all that. So in this way, the Vietnamese villager who couldn't go global now able to produce export product. So I think
let's talk about how Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan economy can go global after this short break at Hyde Park. To stay with us. Back. We're talking to Dr. Udaya Indrarathna, a key policy and strategic expert who has shifted markets in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Dr. Indrarathna, you were talking about earlier on the potential GDP for Sri Lanka. You say we can go up to 12,000. Very promising. But what changes do we need to do in order to get there? Because as far as we all know, Sri Lanka's GDP is on the decline due to various reasons, internal, external matters that could be avoidable and unavoidable. But yet we haven't seen a development in terms of our GDP rate.
Indeewari, I think I need to explain to you this in a little bit academic and scientifically. GDP calculation has at least 3 approaches. The first approach we call expenditure approach to GDP calculation. Second we call income approach. Third we call value added approach. So let me explain to you and try to justify what we need to do using a formula. GDP in expenditure approach we call equal C, which call domestic consumption, plus G, government expenditure, plus I, investment, local and foreign investment, plus export minus import is the GDP calculation formula on export expenditure approach. Now let's start with domestic consumption. The key enabler of domestic consumption is people, their salaries, their employment, and the average earnings. So if the country is not doing well, the domestic consumption is getting very poor. The second is the corporate performance. If the corporate performance is low, then the people won't get that much money in their hands. In simple terms, the other element is the expert Sri Lankans abroad who send money, maybe about $8 billion. Today, 30% of our foreign employed are 30% are domestic, other 30 lowly skilled, and other 40% are semi and high skills. So this ratio has to change. So very much I was explaining to you in C in the formula, we need to therefore develop our skill level, education, and to bring about different level of skill set and salaries to develop one element, domestic consumption. Then we go to I, is investment. Our interest rates are at 14%, 13% if you borrow. No business can survive at that level. And then plus we look at global index and also ECD businesses is a very high rating, and we cannot sustain investment at that level. Then come the G, government expenditure. When the government is in so much debts, how can we government afford to do a lot of investment within the country? So in my opinion, we need to somehow clear the high interest loans, restructure loans, and maybe go for a Japanese loan or something like that. Then comes export minus import is the other formula. So if our exports are only $500 per capita and imports are higher, then it's giving negative to the GDP. So we need to therefore find strategies to improve domestic consumption by increasing employment and increase the earnings and improve corporates. Now, the best thing we need to do is to create entrepreneurial Sri Lanka. The startup culture like you see in India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, it seems to be missing for me in Sri Lanka. And in particular, I teach investor pitch, which is how do a very good idea get the investor attention around the world. We need to think this way. So I think by looking into this each pillar, the strategies can be formulated. That's why I told you very first, the cohesive, coherent strategic planning approaches will solve most of our problems. And a deep dive into these areas are the answer in the very.
You mentioned very specifically about developing an entrepreneurial culture and then also about investor pitching. We also talk about the need for enabling startups in the country, but then these startups don't have enough knowledge on pitching to an investor. That's an area that a lot of young investors or new investors or people who want to be entrepreneurs, they find this difficult. This is a challenge, but we don't get that at our education or through the culture that is set up in the country. So how do we go about this?
When I came to Sri Lanka, this was something I really noticed, that people have brilliant ideas, but they don't have a mechanism available that how they can pitch to an international investor. And so, in fact, I teach investor pitching as entrepreneurship and startup I lecture that.
Right.
And then I specifically develop a program for Sri Lanka for me to teach this, because I think this is one of the key game changers for Sri Lanka. Because our people are brilliant. You know, our King Dutukamnus, Parakram Brahos, Kashyabas, they were the first innovators in this world. So we have the same blood. But the problem is the education system and the whole system doesn't encourage people to learn all that. So that's what I would like to contribute and perhaps, you know, spread that knowledge.
Finally, before we wrap up today, I want to ask you what your key recommendations are, because I know you're drafting the blueprint strategic way forward for Sri Lanka in terms of nation building, and also who can contribute in making this change for nation branding Sri Lanka to the rest of the world. What resources do we bring together? And also, finally, the model and mechanism you're proposing through that draft very quickly.
Well, nation branding, as I told you before, the leadership in the center of the nation brand. So that's why I explained to you about a skillful, knowledgeable leadership will understand the need. As I explained to you in UAE, the tolerance pillar was targeted, and they are trying to improve the tolerance by setting up a Ministry of Tolerance, and I repeat to say Ministry of Tolerance. So similarly, a knowledgeable leadership will understand these are the key things to do.
But shouldn't we bring together resources also with the leadership at the core? Who do we bring together?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. What we call in government, there's a government transformation model called government excellence model, which is used by many countries. Is Indeewari nine pillar model, 5 enabler criteria and 4 resource criteria. What happened is, in an efficient government environment, that it should be competitive. Like in Dubai, you have Dubai Excellence Program Awards, Abu Dhabi Excellence Program Awards. So the first criteria of this mechanism I'm proposing is called leadership. Leadership has about 30 sub-criteria. So like every minister is trained what is his leadership role will be. The second criteria is called policy and strategic criteria. How do you filter and transform that leadership thinking in a ministry or company is the second criteria. Third is your people. How do you innovate and how you develop the skill of your people is the third criteria. Fourth criteria is your society and stakeholders, what you do to enhance them. Fifth are the processes and mechanisms you build within your ministry to make sure even after you, the mechanisms are in place. So these are the 5 enabler criteria in the excellence model. Then there are 4 research criteria. First one is the customer research, how happy, satisfied they are. The second is your people. What did the people learn and develop, to what level are they measured? The third is the society. What did the society achieve as a result of your strategies? The last one, the fourth, are the key performance indicators of overall your ministry on a balanced scorecard, which is people, which is the processes, customers, and financial. In this way, the model is out of 1,000 points. And imagine if your ministry is Ministry of Agriculture, for example, is only 300 out of 1,000. There's 700 gap. So the other ministry may be called Ministry of Finance is 400. So gap is 600. So going from 300 to 800 is the progress of that country. Now Dubai is championing in this, Abu Dhabi is championing in this. Needless to say, product like Emirates Airlines, best airport in the world, Burj Khalifa, all that's a byproduct of the excellence model.
Are you saying we have to do what Dubai did, the UAE did? Or are you saying that we have to revert to the Singapore model or look at Vietnam?
Well, the point is this. This model started in 1950s in Japan by Professor Debin. And he was the father of modern Japan economy miracle. And then it went to USA, then to Europe and all that. It's not a Dubai model. It's a model adapted by all these countries which have developed to that level. And Dubai took the European model and adapted to Dubai standards, where I was fortunate enough to work. So it's not just Dubai specific, but a thinking of government transformation can only come through a transformation based on knowledge and accountability. And this system need to be taught, in my opinion, to all the ministries and everyone in Sri Lanka, and that's a game changer.
You're talking about ministries, government entities, state-owned enterprises, how they can be involved in this transformation.
Exactly.
How do we bring the private sector into this? And also the diplomatic community, they are the ones who are directly representing Sri Lanka outside of the country,
right.
The direct representatives and ambassadors to the nation.
Right.
So that question about nation building and about the private sector in implementing strategy.
Yeah. See what happened, as I said, there are 5 enabler criteria. First is the leadership criteria. Second is, I say, people. Third is stakeholders and partners. So the corporate and diplomat, all that you are talking about, are in the third criteria. So nobody can miss from here, and that's why it's very unique. And I worked with this model for almost 15 years. And I would say the success story of Dubai and Abu Dhabi and many developed countries, Japan, Singapore for that matter, is using a model that transform and work through a mechanism. And every time they start applying and the external auditors come, they can see how many marks or points they get out of 1,000, and they have a good health check. So it's a performance-based management system that thrive and bring about results. And in Dubai, if you look at internet, you can see Government Excellence Program awards. The best minister, best secretary, best strategists are all selected and awarded by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum and Abu Dhabi by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Said. So that's a very big thing. I think we need to wake up and we need to do these game changes, because the education has to come.
With these game changes, where do you see Sri Lanka? Very finally, I have 1 minute for you at Hyde Park. Let's forget about all the theoretical aspects that you want Sri Lanka to implement practically. Where do you see Sri Lanka if all these drivers, the strategy and the way forward and the mechanism is implemented?
I think Sri Lanka will be a developed country and will be a country that everybody talk about. And I think our people have energy, skills, and our country has all the resources that are needed, and a small island, very strategically located. What else can you ask Indeewari than this? And when a country with all that, it must be possible. I think I'm very positive about this change, and I think all of us together and using the MPH theory, which is M for meritocracy, which is that the best person get the best job, and P for pragmatism, which means without having fixed ideas for them to use what is suit for that occasion, whether social or capital, not to be fixed with that. And H is honesty, corrupt-free country. MPH formula is the way forward, game changer for Sri Lanka. I think by right leadership, we could reach world standards for sure.
Thank you very much for the positivity, and I wish you all the very best in all your future endeavors. May you be able to contribute more to Sri Lanka just as much as you have contributed.
Thank you,
to the UAE.
Thank you so very much. That's my wish, and that's why I'm here. And I'm looking forward to give to my country all what I can do. And
I also look forward to the key strategies and the drafts that you are preparing for Sri Lanka. We had with us Dr. Udaya Indrarathna, a strategist, policymaker, and somebody who has shifted markets for UAE during his tenure there. Thank you for joining us at Hyde Park.